Russell Mercer sat in the sterile waiting room of Children's Hospital, watching his 7-year-old son, Danny, press a tissue to his nose. It was the 4th nosebleed that week, the 20th that month. Courtney, his wife, sat beside him with her phone clutched in both hands, her knuckles white. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer? Dr. Patterson emerged from the hallway, her expression carefully neutral in that way doctors had when they didn't have answers. Russell stood, placing a hand on Danny's shoulder. The boy looked up at him with trust that made Russell's chest tighten. They filed into the consultation room. Dr. Patterson pulled up Danny's chart on her computer, the screen filled with test results and reference ranges. We've completed the full hematology panel, the imaging, and the specialized coagulation studies. I wanted to review everything with you. Russell leaned forward. And everything is normal. Dr. Patterson's voice carried frustration. Blood cell counts, platelet function, clotting factors, even the rare bleeding disorders, all within normal parameters. There's no anatomical abnormality in his nasal passages, no tumors, no structural damage. Then why does he bleed every single day? Courtney's voice rose. Sometimes twice a day. He's terrified to go to school. Russell worked as a documentary filmmaker, spending years investigating stories others overlooked. He'd built a career on finding patterns in chaos, on asking the right questions when answers seemed impossible. This was different. This was his son, and every logical avenue led nowhere. I want to run a toxicology screen, Russell said. Comprehensive. Everything you can test for. Dr. Patterson nodded slowly. That's test 14. It'll take a few days for the results. In the meantime, keep doing what you're doing, monitor the episodes, avoid any blood thinners, and document everything. They left the hospital as afternoon sun slanted through the parking garage. Danny held Russell's hand, his other hand still clutching the blood-stained tissue. The boy had stopped talking about it, stopped complaining. That scared Russell most of all, the resignation in his son's eyes. Can we get ice cream? Danny asked quietly. Absolutely, buddy. Russell lifted him up despite the boy insisting he was too old for it. Danny wrapped his arms around Russell's neck, and for a moment, the world contracted to just the two of them. Courtney walked ahead to the car, already dialing. Hi, Mom. Yeah, we just left. No, they still don't know anything. A pause. Okay, yes, we'll stop by tomorrow. Danny would love to see you. Geneva Bradley had been a constant presence since the nosebleed started, showing up at their door with casseroles and concern. Russell appreciated the help, theoretically, but something about his mother-in-law's hovering made his investigator instincts itch. Maybe it was how she always seemed to arrive right after an episode, her eyes scanning Danny with an intensity that felt wrong. They'd met 12 years ago when Russell was filming a documentary about old money families in New England. Courtney had been helping a charity event Geneva organized, and Russell had been struck by how different daughter and mother seemed. Courtney was warm, spontaneous, quick to laugh. Geneva was measured, controlled, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Your mother knows we're seeing the chemist tomorrow? Russell asked as he buckled Danny into his car seat. She thinks it's a waste of time. Courtney started the engine. Says we should trust the doctors. The doctors have no answers. Russell turned to look at his wife. I'm not stopping until I find out what's wrong with our son. That evening, after Danny fell asleep, Russell sat in his home office reviewing footage from his latest project, a documentary about environmental toxins affecting children in industrial towns. His phone buzzed. A text from his research assistant, Devin Kirkpatrick. Found something interesting about that family you asked about. Call me. Russell stepped onto the back porch before dialing. Devin answered on the first ring. So, I did that background check you wanted on Geneva Bradley, Devin said. Took some digging. She scrubbed most of her past pretty clean. Most? She was married before Courtney's father. First husband died young, 32. Heart attack. They had a daughter together. Russell's pulse quickened. Courtney never mentioned a half-sister. Because the girl died. For years old. Acute poisoning, but they ruled it accidental. Said she got into cleaning supplies. Geneva was devastated, apparently. The marriage didn't survive it. She remarried 2 years later to Richard Bradley, had Courtney, and as far as public records show, never spoke about the first child again. Russell stared into the darkness of his backyard. "Send me everything you found." "Russell, why are you investigating your mother-in-law?" "Because something's wrong, and I can't figure out what." He ended the call and stood there for a long moment, pieces of a puzzle floating in his mind, not yet connecting but present. A dead child, a dead husband, and now Danny, bleeding inexplicably, declining despite normal test results. The next morning, Russell took Danny to Riverside Park. The toxicology results wouldn't be ready for 2 more days, and waiting felt like drowning. Danny wanted to play, to be normal, and Russell would give him that. They were at the duck pond when it happened. Another nosebleed, sudden and heavy. Russell grabbed napkins from his backpack, tilting Danny's head forward the way the doctors taught them. A man nearby, elderly with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, approached. "That's a bad one," the man said. He had an accent Russell couldn't place. European maybe. "How often does this happen?" "Too often." Russell applied pressure to Danny's nose. "Every day, for 6 weeks." The man's gaze drifted down to Danny's wrist, where a silver bracelet caught the sunlight. Geneva had given it to him 2 months ago, right before his birthday. A family heirloom, she'd called it, worn by Bradley boys for generations. The man's face changed. Color drained from his cheeks, and he took a step back. "Where did he get that bracelet?" "His grandmother gave it to him." "What?" "Take it off. Now." The man's voice carried an urgency that made Russell's hands move before his mind caught up. He unclasped the bracelet, and Danny immediately rubbed his wrist where a faint rash had developed. "What is this?" Russell held the bracelet up. The man pulled a small knife from his pocket, the kind used for whittling. He scraped the inside of the bracelet's clasp, collecting a fine powder on the blade. His hand shook slightly. "I worked as an industrial chemist for 40 years. I've seen this before. Thallium sulfate." The man looked at Russell. "It's a rat poison, banned in most countries. Small doses cause bleeding, hair loss, nerve damage. The symptoms can mimic dozens of other conditions." Russell felt the ground shift beneath him. "Someone poisoned my son?" "The residue is inside the clasp. It would transfer to his skin, absorb into his bloodstream. Whoever gave him this knew exactly what they were doing." The chemist handed Russell a business card. "I'm Henry Elliott. I lecture sometimes at the university chemistry department. Have the bracelet tested, but do it quietly. If someone is poisoning your son, they can't know you've discovered it." Russell drove home in a daze, Danny beside him asking why they'd left the park so quickly. The bracelet sat in a plastic bag in Russell's pocket, and with it, the complete reconfiguration of his reality. Geneva had given Danny this bracelet. Geneva, whose first child died of poisoning. Geneva, who'd lost her first husband to an early heart attack. And heart attacks were symptoms of thallium poisoning in adults. He couldn't tell Courtney. Not yet. Not until he was certain, until he understood the full scope of what was happening. His wife loved her mother desperately, had grown up as Geneva's only child, sheltered and adored. The accusation would destroy her. At home, Russell locked himself in his office and called a contact from his documentary work, Sarah Mayer, a forensic toxicologist who'd helped him with a film about industrial contamination. She agreed to meet him that evening. Courtney was putting Danny down for a nap when Geneva arrived unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key. Russell heard her voice from the kitchen, bright and concerned. "How's my favorite grandson?" Russell descended the stairs, forcing his expression neutral. Geneva stood by the counter in her immaculate cream suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. She'd always looked like old money, the kind that came from 3 generations of carefully managed trust funds. At 64, she maintained the rigid posture of someone who'd been taught deportment as a child. "Russell, darling, you look exhausted." She moved to embrace him, and Russell had to stop himself from recoiling. "Any news from the doctors?" "Still waiting on more tests." He studied her face, looking for cracks in the facade. "They're being very thorough. Perhaps too thorough. Sometimes doctors create problems where none exist, running test after test." Her hand rested on his arm. "Where's Danny's bracelet? I noticed he wasn't wearing it at the hospital yesterday." Russell's blood ran cold. She'd been watching them at the hospital? He took it off. It was irritating his wrist. Something flickered in Geneva's eyes, gone too quickly to identify. Oh, that's a shame. It's a very special piece. My father wore it, and his father before him. I had it specially cleaned and fitted for Danny. Where did you have it cleaned? A jeweler in Boston. Why do you ask? Just curious. Russell smiled, the expression feeling like broken glass. Danny loved it. I'm sure he'll want to wear it again soon. Geneva stayed for an hour, helping Courtney with laundry, discussing Danny's upcoming school play, behaving exactly like a doting grandmother. Russell watched her interact with Danny when he woke from his nap, saw the way she stroked his hair, adjusted his shirt collar, straightened the books on his shelf. Possessive, controlling, and underneath it all, something Russell now recognized as calculation. After Geneva left, Russell told Courtney he needed to follow up on some footage downtown. Instead, he drove to Sarah Meyer's lab at the university. She met him in the parking lot, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who testified in 3 major environmental contamination cases Russell had filmed. You sounded stressed on the phone, Sarah said, leading him to her lab. What do you have? Russell placed a bracelet on her examination table. I need you to test this for thallium sulfate. Inside the clasp, Sarah pulled on gloves, examining the bracelet under a magnifying light. She was silent for several minutes before looking up at Russell. There's definitely something here. I can see powder residue in the engraving. This will take a few hours for a full analysis. How long would it take for thallium poisoning to become fatal? Depends on the dose and duration of exposure. What? Sarah's expression shifted to concern. Russell, whose bracelet is this? My son's. His grandmother gave it to him 2 months ago. That's when the nosebleeds started. Jesus. Sarah immediately began setting up her equipment. Thallium accumulates in the body. If he's been exposed for 2 months, how do I get it out of his system? Prussian blue. It's a chelating agent, binds to thallium, and helps the body excrete it. But Russell, if this is what I think it is, you need to go to the police. Not until I know everything. Russell sat heavily in a chair. The woman who gave him this bracelet is my wife's mother. She's wealthy, connected, and ruthless. If I accuse her without irrefutable proof, she'll bury me in legal proceedings and still have access to my son. Sarah nodded slowly. I'll have preliminary results in 3 hours. Full analysis by tomorrow morning. And Russell? Until then, keep that bracelet far away from your son. Russell spent those 3 hours in his car, parked at a coffee shop, researching everything he could find about thallium poisoning. The symptoms matched Danny's perfectly. Nosebleeds, fatigue, the slight tremor in his hands Russell had attributed to nervousness. Left untreated, thallium poisoning caused organ failure, neurological damage, death. His phone buzzed with a text from Courtney. Mom wants us to come to dinner tomorrow night. She's making Danny's favorite. Russell stared at the message. Geneva was escalating. She noticed the bracelet was gone and was finding new ways to maintain contact, new opportunities. He needed to understand her endgame before she could act again. His phone rang. Sarah. It's thallium. Pure thallium sulfate, concentrated in the clasp mechanism. The engraving inside acts as a reservoir. Every time the bracelet moved, it would release particles directly onto the skin. How much is there? Enough to kill an adult, carefully distributed. Someone engineered this, Russell. This isn't accidental contamination. The thallium was deliberately placed using a method that would ensure consistent, repeated exposure. Russell closed his eyes. Can you document everything? Photographs, chain of custody, the full analysis? Already doing it. But Russell, I know. I need to protect my son. I will. He ended the call and sat in the silence of his car, feeling something cold and determined crystallize in his chest. Geneva Bradley had tried to kill his son. Slowly, carefully, in a way designed to look like a mysterious illness. And if Russell hadn't taken Danny to that park, if Henry Elliott hadn't been there, Danny would be dying right now, while doctors puzzled over his inexplicable decline. The question wasn't whether to make Geneva pay. The question was how to do it in a way that ensured she could never hurt anyone again. Russell drove to the public library, using their computers instead of his own. If he was going to investigate Geneva properly, He needed to leave no digital trail she could discover. He started with the details Devin had found. Geneva's first marriage to a man named Douglas Hardin, their daughter Merle, the deaths that followed. The newspaper archives told a grim story. Douglas Hardin had died of sudden cardiac arrest while on a business trip. He'd been 32, athletic, no history of heart disease. The death was ruled natural causes despite the unusual circumstances. For months later, Merle Hardin, age 4, died after what was termed accidental poisoning. The articles mentioned cleaning supplies, but reading between the lines, Russell sensed the investigators had been suspicious. No charges were ever filed. He dug deeper, following Geneva's trail back further. Born Geneva Thornton in 1962 to a wealthy manufacturing family. Only child. Her parents died when she was 30, her father from stroke, her mother from complications of pneumonia, both within 6 months of each other. Geneva inherited everything. She'd married Douglas Hardin a year later. Russell found the wedding announcement, studied the photograph of young Geneva, so similar to the woman he knew, but with something different in her eyes. Something hungry. The pattern was there if you knew to look for it. People close to Geneva died, usually when their deaths benefited her financially or emotionally. And she was never quite close enough to be seriously suspected. Russell needed more. He called Devin again. I need you to find out everything about the Bradley family finances. Trusts, life insurance policies, anything involving Danny or Courtney. What am I looking for? I think Geneva has a reason beyond simple malice for wanting Danny dead. Find me the money trail. While Devin worked, Russell focused on the immediate problem, protecting Danny without revealing what he knew. He called Dr. Patterson's office, requesting an urgent appointment to discuss the toxicology results. The test Geneva had paid for wouldn't show thallium because no one had been looking for it. But Sarah's analysis would. Russell needed Danny on Prussian blue immediately, needed the thallium levels documented, needed irrefutable medical evidence of poisoning. That night, after Danny was asleep, Russell sat with Courtney on their back porch. The toxicology screen came back with something concerning. He said carefully, Danny has elevated levels of a toxic substance. The doctors want to start a chelation treatment. Courtney's face went pale. What substance? How did he get exposed? They're still determining the source. Could be environmental, could be something in the house. Russell hated lying to her, but the truth would shatter her. The important thing is we caught it early. The treatment will help. Oh my God. Courtney pressed her hands to her face. We need to tell my mother. She'll want to know. No. Russell's voice came out sharper than intended. Not yet. Not until we know more. You know how your mother gets. She'll panic. She'll interfere with the doctors. She'll make everything more complicated. Courtney looked at him strangely. Since when do you want to keep things from my mother? Since I realized how much she stresses you out when she's involved. Russell took his wife's hand. Let's handle this ourselves first, okay? Just us and the doctors. We can tell Geneva once Danny's better. Courtney nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her eyes. Okay, but just for now. Russell knew he was running out of time. The moment Geneva learned Danny was receiving treatment that would eliminate the thallium from his system, she'd know someone had discovered her method. She'd either flee or find a new way to finish what she'd started. The next morning, Devin sent through his findings. Russell read the documents in his locked office, his anger building with each page. There was a trust, a substantial one, established by Geneva's parents, meant to pass to Geneva's descendants. But the terms were specific. If Courtney died before Geneva, the money reverted to Geneva's control. And if Courtney's children died before reaching adulthood, the trust dissolved entirely and the assets became Geneva's outright. Danny's death wouldn't just remove a grandchild Geneva clearly saw as competition for Courtney's attention. It would secure Geneva's financial future and give her complete control over Courtney's life. Russell's phone buzzed. A text from Geneva. I've planned a special lunch for Danny tomorrow. Just him and me, grandmother-grandson time. I'll pick him up at noon. Every instinct Russell had screamed danger. He texted back, Danny's not feeling well. Maybe next week. The response came immediately. Courtney said he's doing better. I insist, Russell. I hardly see him anymore. Russell stared at the message. Geneva was pushing, unwilling to wait now that her primary method had been discovered. She was adapting, planning something new. He needed to move faster. Russell called Henry Elliott, the chemist from a park. They met at a quiet diner far from Russell's neighborhood. Henry listened as Russell laid out everything he discovered. The deaths in Geneva's past, the trust fund, the pattern of poisoning. You need to go to the police, Henry said. With what? Circumstantial evidence about deaths 30 years ago. They'll investigate. It'll take months. And meanwhile, Geneva has access to my son. Russell leaned forward. I need something better. I need to prove what she did so thoroughly that she can't escape it. Henry was quiet for a long moment. What are you planning? I'm going to give her exactly what she wants. An opportunity. And I'm going to document everything. That's dangerous. So is waiting. Russell met the older man's eyes. Will you help me? Henry pulled out a small notebook, began writing. Thallium has a distinctive spectroscopic signature. If you can get me samples of anything Geneva has given to Danny, food, drinks, toys, I can test them immediately. And if she's using thallium again, we'll catch her in the act. Russell felt a grim satisfaction settle over him. Then let's set the trap. He spent the afternoon preparing. First, he installed hidden cameras throughout his house. In the kitchen, the living room, Danny's bedroom. Small, sophisticated equipment he'd used for documentary work, easily concealed. Then he called Courtney. I think we should invite your mother over for dinner tonight. I feel bad about keeping her away. Courtney's relief was audible. Really? Oh, Russell, thank you. She's been so worried about Danny. Geneva arrived at 6, carrying a bakery box. I brought Danny's favorite cookies, she announced. The ones from that little shop in Boston. Russell smiled and took the box, his skin crawling at the contact. How thoughtful. Why don't you visit with Danny while I help Courtney with dinner? In the kitchen, Russell carefully removed 2 cookies, sealing them in separate plastic bags he prepared. These he would give to Henry. The rest he would ensure Danny never ate. Dinner was surreal. Geneva sat at the head of the table, talking about a charity auction she was organizing, asking Danny about school, behaving exactly like a loving grandmother. Courtney laughed at her mother's stories, and Russell played his part, passing dishes and pouring wine. But he watched. He watched Geneva's eyes track Danny's movements. Watch her maneuver closer to his water glass when she thought no one was looking. Watch her reach for Danny's plate to add more vegetables, her hand hovering over his food for just a moment too long. After dinner, Geneva insisted on tucking Danny into bed, reading him his favorite story. Russell stood in the doorway, every muscle tense, as she kissed Danny's forehead and adjusted his blankets with those careful, controlled hands. Sweet dreams, darling, Geneva whispered. Grandma loves you so much. When she left, Russell checked Danny's room thoroughly. Found nothing unusual, but the cameras were recording everything, and that was what mattered. Geneva stopped at the front door, turning to Russell while Courtney fetched her coat. I heard Danny's been seeing a new doctor, someone about toxins. Russell kept his expression neutral. News travels fast. I have friends at the hospital. Geneva's smile was pleasant, but her eyes were calculating. It's concerning that they found something environmental. We should have your whole house tested. I'll arrange it. That's generous, but we're handling it. I insist. Her hand closed on his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Danny is my only grandchild. I won't have him at risk. Russell met her gaze, let her see nothing. Of course. Thank you, Geneva. After she left, Russell immediately took the sealed cookies to his car and drove to Henry's address. The old chemist was waiting, his home laboratory already set up. Russell watched as Henry scraped samples from the cookies, mixed solutions, examined results under various lights. Positive, Henry said finally. Both cookies contained thallium sulfate. Whoever prepared these knew exactly what they were doing. The thallium is distributed in the chocolate chips, probably dissolved in the melted chocolate before baking. It would have been virtually undetectable. Russell photographed everything. The cookies, the test results, Henry's equipment showing positive readings. How much thallium? In both cookies combined? Enough to cause serious harm, possibly death, in a child Danny's size. Especially if he's already dealing with accumulated thallium in his system. Henry looked at Russell. You can't let your son eat anything this woman provides. I won't. But now I have proof of ongoing poisoning. Russell felt the pieces clicking into place. She's not stopping. Even knowing Danny's being tested, she's still trying. Because she's desperate, Henry observed. Whatever her reason for wanting him dead, it's important enough to take increasing risks. Russell drove home with the evidence secured in his trunk. Courtney was already asleep, exhausted from the stress of Danny's illness. Russell sat in his home office, reviewing the camera footage from dinner. There, at minute 14, Geneva's hand near Danny's water glass, her body blocking Courtney's view. At minute 23, her hand hovering over Danny's plate. At minute 41, in Danny's bedroom, Geneva reaching in her purse and then touching the stuffed bear on Danny's nightstand. Russell went to Danny's room, careful not to wake him. The bear was exactly where Geneva had touched it. Russell examined it under a bright light, found white powder on one ear, the ear Danny often held against his face while sleeping. He sealed the bear in a bag. Another sample for Henry. Another piece of evidence. But evidence for what? A police investigation that would take months? A trial where Geneva's expensive lawyers would shred circumstantial evidence? Where Danny might have to testify, reliving his grandmother's betrayal? No, Russell was done with official channels. Geneva had tried to kill his son slowly, methodically, with plausible deniability at every turn. She'd planned for months, calculated every detail, exploited her position as loving grandmother to commit an almost perfect murder. Russell would match her calculation with his own. He would use Geneva's methods, her arrogance, her absolute certainty that she was smarter than everyone around her. He would give her an opportunity she couldn't resist, and he would watch her destroy herself. It took Russell 3 more days to put all the pieces in place. 3 days during which he made sure Danny ate nothing Geneva provided, during which he documented every attempt she made to get close to his son. 3 days of planning, of carefully constructing the trap that would end this nightmare. On the morning of the 4th day, Russell called Geneva. Courtney and I need to go to Philadelphia for 3 days. An emergency with her documentary film. The investors are threatening to pull out. Oh dear, what about Danny? That's why I'm calling. We were hoping you could watch him. I know it's a lot to ask, but of course, I'd be delighted. 3 whole days with my grandson. Geneva's voice brightened. You can drop him off whenever you need. Tomorrow morning, we have an early flight. Perfect. I'll prepare his favorite room. And Russell, don't worry about a thing. Danny will be safe with me. Russell ended the call and immediately texted Devin. It's happening. Get everyone in position. For the past 3 days, while Russell gathered evidence, Devin had been assembling a team. Sarah Mayer to monitor medical data. A private investigator named Jordan Torres to handle surveillance. A lawyer, Leslie Thornton, who specialized in elder abuse and exploitation cases. And crucially, a contact at the DA's office who owed Russell a favor from a documentary that had freed a wrongly convicted man. They were ready. Russell broke the news to Courtney that evening, apologizing for the last-minute trip. It's just 3 days. Your mother loves having Danny. It'll be good for both of them. Courtney hesitated. Are you sure? With Danny still recovering. The doctor said he's doing much better. The chelation therapy is working. Russell pulled his wife close. And honestly, some time with your mother might be good for you too. You've been so stressed. The next morning, Russell and Courtney loaded Danny into the car with his overnight bag. Russell had packed everything himself. Clothes, toys, books, sealed snacks. Nothing Geneva could tamper with before Danny's arrival. At Geneva's house, a sprawling estate in the suburbs, the older woman greeted them with open arms. My darling boy, we're going to have such fun. I planned all your favorite activities. Danny hugged his grandmother, and Russell had to watch, had to let it happen while knowing what she truly was. Courtney kissed Danny goodbye, making him promise to behave. As they drove away, Courtney waved until Geneva's house disappeared from view. I feel guilty leaving him. He'll be fine, Russell lied. Because Danny wouldn't be at Geneva's house. Not really. They drove to the airport, went through the motions of checking in, even walked to the security checkpoint. Then, as Courtney headed to the restroom, Russell texted her, "Need to grab something from the car. Meet you at the gate." He didn't go to the car. He went to the parking garage where Devin waited in an unmarked van, equipment already set up. Jordan Torres was there too, along with Sarah Mayer and a woman Russell didn't recognize. "This is Detective Mandy Phelps," Jordan introduced. "She's with the Special Victims Unit." Off the clock, but interested. Russell shook her hand. "I appreciate you being here. Jordan showed me your evidence," Mandy said. "If this plays out like you think it will, I'll be able to move fast. But Russell, you understand this is risky? If something goes wrong, it won't." Russell opened his phone, pulled up the live feed from Geneva's house. "Danny isn't actually there." Devin grinned. "Want to explain how you pulled that off?" Geneva doesn't know that Danny's best friend, a boy named Mickey Head from school, looks remarkably similar to him from a distance. Mickey's mother is a friend of ours, and when I explained the situation, she agreed to help. Mickey is at Geneva's house right now, wearing Danny's clothes, with instructions to stay in the guest room with the door locked, claiming he doesn't feel well. His mother is in the house across the street with a clear view and a phone ready to call police at any sign of actual danger. "And Danny?" Sarah asked. "Safe with my brother in New York. Geneva has never met my brother. She doesn't even know I have one." Russell pulled up multiple camera feeds. "I installed cameras throughout Geneva's house yesterday while she was out. She doesn't lock her doors. Arrogance makes people careless. We can see every room except the bathrooms." On screen, Geneva was already in her kitchen, pulling items from her refrigerator. She'd changed from the pleasant grandmother outfit into casual clothes, her expression different without an audience. "Calculating. Cold. She's preparing food," Sarah observed. "Probably lacing it with thallium. That's what we're betting on." Russell checked his watch. "Courtney's flight leaves in 40 minutes. By the time she lands in Philadelphia and realizes I'm not there, this will be over." Jordan frowned. "She doesn't know? If Courtney knew, Geneva would see it in her eyes. My wife can't lie to save her life. It's one of the things I love about her." This way, Geneva thinks she has 3 unsupervised days to finish what she started. They watched in silence as Geneva worked in her kitchen, methodical and precise. She prepared a pasta dish, then carefully opened a small vial from her purse, adding its contents to the sauce. No hesitation, no remorse. She stirred in, tasted it, added more seasoning to mask any unusual flavor. "Got it," Devin confirmed, recording everything. Clear poisoning attempt on camera. Geneva covered the pasta and placed it in the refrigerator, then moved to the guest room where Mickey was supposed to be resting. She knocked softly. "Danny, darling? Are you awake?" "Not feeling good, Grandma." Mickey called through the door, his voice muffled. The boy was a natural actor, committed to his role. "Poor sweetheart. I'll bring you something in a little while." Geneva's voice was pure concern, but her expression, caught by the camera in the hallway, showed satisfaction. Over the next several hours, Geneva made multiple attempts to coax Mickey out of the room, each time rebuffed by the boy's claims of stomach upset or fatigue. Russell had coached him well. Stay in the room, stay away from anything Geneva might have touched, and above all, don't actually consume anything she provides. By evening, Geneva's frustration was evident. She stood outside the locked guest room, speaking through the door. "Danny, you need to eat something. I made your favorite pasta. Just a few bites. Maybe later, Grandma." Geneva's mask slipped for just a moment. Her hand formed a fist against the door, her jaw tightened. Then she smoothed her expression and walked away. "She's panicking," Mandy observed. "She's on a timeline and her victim isn't cooperating. Because she knows Courtney and I'll be back in 3 days," Russell said. "She needs Danny to ingest enough thallium to cause a medical crisis before then. Something she can blame on a tragic accident while he was in her care." Sarah nodded. "It's actually smart from a poisoner's perspective. If Danny dies while in her care, she can claim he was already sick, that she tried to help but couldn't save him. The grief-stricken grandmother would be above suspicion." At 10 p.m., Geneva tried a new approach. She knocked on the guest room door again. "Danny? Sweetheart, I'm worried about you. I think we should call your parents." Mickey, following Russell's instructions, responded, "No, don't call them. I don't want to ruin their trip. I'm just tired." Through the camera, Russell saw Geneva's expression shift. She was cornered, growing desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. At midnight, Geneva entered the kitchen again. This time, she pulled out a bottle of children's pain reliever, the kind Danny took for headaches. The camera captured her opening it, adding clear liquid from her vial to the medicine, then carefully resealing the bottle. "That's more concentrated," Sarah said sharply. "Whatever she's adding, she's increasing the dose." Geneva carried the bottle upstairs, knocked on the guest room door. "Danny, I heard you moving around. Do you have a headache?" "I have your medicine. I'm okay, Grandma. Please, darling, just open the door. Let me see you." Mickey didn't respond. In the van, Russell texted Mickey's mother. "Tell him to cough a few times, make 6 sounds, but don't open the door." They heard Mickey cough, then the sound of retching. Geneva's voice turned sharp. "Danny, open this door right now. I feel sick." For a moment, Russell thought Geneva might actually force the door, but she stepped back, her expression murderous when she thought no one was watching. She returned to her own bedroom, and through the camera there, they watched her make a phone call. Devin enhanced the audio. Geneva was calling someone named Julio Sellers. "I need you to pick up a package tomorrow morning. Deliver it to an address, I'll text you." "And Julio? This needs to look like an accident. The boy is already sick, already weak. It should be easy." Russell's blood ran cold. Geneva wasn't just planning to poison Danny herself. She was hiring someone to ensure the job was completed. "That's conspiracy to commit murder," Mandy said, already on her phone. "I'm calling this in." "Wait." Russell held up a hand. "Not yet. We need to identify this Julio Sellers. Need to catch Geneva in the complete act. If we move now, she'll claim the conversation was about something else, that we're misunderstanding. Russell, one more day. Let her make one more move." But now we know she's escalating. Time to bring Danny back into play. At 3 a.m., after Geneva had finally gone to sleep, Russell entered her house using the key he'd taken from Courtney's key ring. He moved silently through the rooms, placing additional cameras, a GPS tracker on Geneva's car, and a small recording device in her purse. Then he photographed the tainted pasta, the medicine bottle, everything Geneva had prepared. He also took samples of everything, sealing them in evidence bags for later testing. Back in the van, Russell pulled up a new camera feed, this one from across the street. Tomorrow morning, Danny's actually going to arrive. The real Danny, not Mickey. Mickey's mother will pick him up at dawn before Geneva wakes, and I'll bring Danny here. Is that wise? Sarah looked concerned. Danny will never be alone with her. I'll be in the house, hidden, the whole time. But Geneva needs to see him, needs to believe her opportunity is real. And I need her to try one more time, on camera, with witnesses ready to intervene immediately. The next morning proceeded exactly as Russell planned. Mickey was extracted before sunrise. At 8 a.m., Russell brought Danny to Geneva's house, parking down the street. "Dad, I don't understand," Danny said. "You said I was going to stay with Uncle Tyler." "Change of plans, buddy. But here's the thing, this is really important. No matter what Grandma offers you to eat or drink today, you say no. Tell her your stomach hurts. Can you do that?" Danny nodded, though confusion filled his eyes. "Is Grandma sick?" "Something like that." Russell hugged his son. "I'm going to be nearby the whole time. If anything feels wrong, if you get scared, you go outside and wait for me." Okay, Dad." Russell watched Danny walk to Geneva's front door, watch his son knock and wait. Geneva answered in a robe, shock crossing her face. "Danny, what are you doing here?" "Dad had to come back early. He said I could finish my visit with you." Geneva's eyes scanned the street. Russell ducked lower in his car. "Where is your father?" "He had to go to a meeting. He'll pick me up tonight." Russell saw Geneva's mind working, saw her recalculate. She ushered Danny inside, already moving toward the kitchen. "Have you had breakfast?" "I'm not hungry." "Nonsense. Growing boys need to eat." In the van, Russell monitored every move. Jordan Torres was positioned on the street with a clear line of sight to every exit. Sarah had a medical kit ready. Mandy Phelps had a team on standby 3 blocks away. Geneva prepared eggs, toast, orange juice. Russell's chest tightened as he watched her go to the refrigerator, pull out a small, unmarked bottle, add several drops to Danny's orange juice when his back was turned. "Got it," Devin confirmed. clear poisoning attempt. Geneva set the plate in front of Danny, her smile warm. Eat up, darling. Danny looked at the food, then at his grandmother. My stomach really hurts. Maybe later. Geneva's smile stiffened. Danny, you need to eat. Don't make this difficult. But Dad said. Danny stopped himself. Your father said what? Russell's phone buzzed. A text from Danny. Grandma is acting weird. I'm scared. Russell was out of the car immediately, striding toward Geneva's house. He texted Mandy, now? Move now. He reached the front door as Geneva's voice rose inside. Danny, drink that juice right now. No. Russell burst through the door. Geneva spun, her face transforming from anger to shock to something like terror as she saw him. Behind him, Mandy Phelps and two uniformed officers entered. Russell? What is this? Geneva's voice was shrill. Danny, come here. Russell pulled his son behind him, placing himself between the boy and Geneva. It's over, Geneva. I don't know what you think. I know you've been poisoning him. The bracelet, the cookies, the medicine you tried to give him last night. All of it contaminated with thallium sulfate. Russell's voice was steady cold. I know about your first husband, your first daughter. I know about the trust fund and why you need Danny dead. Geneva's expression cycled through denial, rage, calculation. You can't prove anything. Actually, Mandy stepped forward. We can. We have you on video tampering with food and drinks, making phone calls arranging for harm to come to a child, and Mr. Mercer has physical evidence of thallium poisoning from multiple sources you provided. This is entrapment. Geneva's composure cracked. You tricked me. No, Russell said quietly. I protected my son while documenting your ongoing attempts to murder him. There's a difference. Geneva's eyes found Danny, and for just a moment, Russell saw something like genuine emotion cross her face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. Courtney will never forgive you for this. You've taken her mother from her. You took yourself, Russell said. The moment you decided your grandson's life was worth less than your bank account. Geneva was arrested that morning. In her purse, police found 2 vials of thallium sulfate, a detailed schedule of when to administer doses, and notes about Danny's symptoms. In her safe deposit box, they would later find documentation of previous poisoning cases she'd studied, medical journals with passages highlighted about undetectable toxins. The evidence was overwhelming. Geneva Bradley had spent months planning the perfect murder, and Russell had documented every step. Over the following weeks, more details emerged. Julio Sellers was a handyman Geneva had hired before, easily pressured into testifying against her in exchange for a reduced sentence. He revealed that Geneva had approached him about taking care of a problem, offering him $50,000 to ensure an accident happened to a child who wouldn't be missed much anyway. The investigation into Geneva's past uncovered even darker truths. Her first husband, Douglas, had been insured for $2 million. His death ruled natural despite thallium poisoning symptoms. Their daughter Merle had indeed died of poisoning, but the detective who'd investigated maintained detailed private notes expressing his certainty that Geneva was responsible. Without proof, he'd been overruled. Geneva's own parents had died under suspicious circumstances, both with symptoms consistent with gradual poisoning. She was a serial killer who'd operated for decades, using her wealth and social position as shields, choosing victims carefully and maintaining perfect deniability. Until Russell. The trial was swift. Geneva's lawyers tried to claim she was being framed, that Russell had planted evidence, that the whole thing was an elaborate custody dispute. But the evidence was irrefutable. The cameras, the tested samples, the witnesses, the confession she'd made to Julio Sellers on a recorded phone line. Geneva Bradley was convicted of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and aggravated assault. The prosecutors also pursued charges for her first husband and daughter, though she refused to confess to those crimes. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Given her age, it was effectively a life sentence. Russell sat in the courtroom as the verdict was read, Danny beside him. His son had been through therapy, processing the betrayal from someone he'd loved and trusted. It would take time to heal, but Danny was young, resilient. He would recover. Courtney had been devastated. The revelation about her mother had shattered something fundamental in her worldview. She'd moved through stages of denial, anger, grief. But she'd also chosen to believe Russell, to trust the evidence even when every instinct screamed that her mother couldn't have done these things. Their marriage had survived, though it bore scars. They were in counseling, working through the trauma together. On the courthouse steps after sentencing, a reporter approached Russell. "Mr. Mercer, you saved your son's life through incredibly clever detective work. Do you have any statement?" Russell looked at the camera. "I have a message for anyone out there who suspects their child is in danger. Trust your instincts. Ask questions. Demand answers. Don't let anyone, no matter how respectable or beloved, have unchecked access to your children. And if you discover something terrible, document everything. The truth needs evidence to be believed." He took Danny's hand and walked away, leaving the courthouse and Geneva's legacy of death behind them. Months later, Russell released a documentary about the case. He titled it The Perfect Grandmother, a stark examination of how family loyalty and social respectability could hide monsters. The documentary featured interviews with a detective who'd suspected Geneva decades ago, with Henry Elliott the chemist, with Sarah Mayer explaining how thallium poisoning worked and why it was so hard to detect. It won several awards and sparked a national conversation about elder abuse, about how poisoning was often dismissed as unlikely, about how systematic investigation could uncover even the most carefully hidden crimes. But for Russell, the real victory was simpler. Danny was healthy. The thallium had been flushed from his system with no permanent damage. His son laughed again, played soccer again, slept through the night without fear. One evening, nearly a year after Geneva's conviction, Russell found Danny in his room, looking at an old photo album. There were pictures of Geneva at Danny's birthday parties, at Christmas mornings, teaching him to ride a bike. "Dad," Danny looked up. "Why did Grandma want to hurt me?" Russell sat beside his son, choosing his words carefully. Some people get sick in their minds. They start seeing other people as obstacles to what they want, rather than as people who matter. Your grandmother was sick like that for a long time. Did you always know? No. I didn't see it until the evidence was impossible to ignore. But once I did, I made sure she couldn't hurt you. Russell put his arm around Danny. That's what parents do. We protect our children, no matter what. Danny was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad you're my son." They closed the photo album together. Some memories needed to be put away, sealed off, relegated to history. Geneva Bradley had tried to make Danny a victim of her calculated evil. Instead, she'd underestimated a father's love and a detective's persistence. Her perfect crime had met its perfect opponent. And Russell Mercer had ensured that his son would grow up free from her shadow, protected not just by luck or coincidence, but by a father willing to do whatever was necessary to save him. Geneva would spend the rest of her life in prison, her reputation destroyed, her crimes exposed to the world. Danny would spend his childhood playing, learning, becoming the person he was meant to be. Justice, Russell had learned, wasn't always about the legal system. Sometimes it was about one man standing between evil and innocence, refusing to yield. Sometimes it was about a father who loved his son more than he feared the monster wearing a grandmother's face. And sometimes when you fought smart instead of just fighting hard, when you documented instead of accused, when you built an unassailable case instead of relying on others to believe you, sometimes you won. Russell had won. More importantly, Danny had survived. That was all that mattered. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.